November 1985, Allenstown, New Hampshire. A hunter moving through Bear Brook State Park stopped when he saw something in the brush near the ruins of a burned-out store at the edge of a trailer park. A 55-gallon steel drum. Rusted, sitting in the undergrowth like it had been placed there deliberately and then forgotten. He nudged it with his boot. Inside were two people, a woman and a young girl. Both had been beaten to death. Both had no identification, no wallets, no jewelry, nothing carrying a name. Police swept the area, documented the scene, logged the drum, and opened an investigation into two unidentified victims. For the next 15 years, investigators returned to that site. They walked it. They searched it. Evidence teams swept it. Reporters visited it. Nobody saw the second drum. It was sitting 300 feet away the entire time. In May 2000, a state police investigator retracing the original scene looked into the brush and found it. Inside were two more children, both beaten, both unnamed, 4 bodies, 2 steel drums. No names on any of them. The youngest was estimated between 1 and 4 years old. Nobody knew who she was in 1985. Nobody knew in 2000. Nobody knew in 2010. Nobody knew in 2019 when 3 of the 4 finally had names after the longest identification effort in New Hampshire history. She waited in that drum for 40 years. Her name was Rasmussen, and what it took to finally say that name out loud is one of the most extraordinary investigations in the history of American cold cases. Bear Brook State Park covers nearly 10,000 acres of dense forest in central New Hampshire. In November, it is cold and quiet, and the kind of terrain where sound does not carry far. The park sits in Allenstown, a town of roughly 4,000 people about 20 minutes south of Concord. It is the kind of place where families camp in the summer and hunters move through in the fall, and the rest of the year it is mostly empty. The burned-out store at the edge of the trailer park had once been a small business. At some point it caught fire, and after the fire it was left to become part of the landscape. The kind of rural ruin that gets absorbed into the background so gradually that people who pass it every day stop registering it at all. Nobody registered the drum either. When officers arrived after the hunter's 911 call, they found the remains of a woman estimated between 23 and 27 years old, and a girl estimated between 6 and 10. Both had sustained blunt force trauma to the head. Both appeared to have been dead for several years. The best estimates placed their deaths somewhere in the late 1970s or the very early 1980s. The drum had been a container for industrial chemicals at some point. It had been modified slightly before the bodies were placed inside. It was deliberate, methodical, planned. New Hampshire State Police opened the investigation and immediately began the identification process. Forensic artists created composite sketches of both victims. The sketches were circulated through law enforcement networks across New England and distributed to media outlets, dental offices, hospitals, and police departments throughout New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Flyers went out, tips came in, none of them led anywhere. No missing persons report matched either description. No family came forward. No dentist recognized the dental records. The woman and the girl from the first drum remained unidentified, and the investigation, as happens with cases that produce no leads, began to slow, then stop. 15 years later, on a May afternoon in 2000, state police investigator drove back out to Bear Brook. He had been reviewing the original documentation from 1985, photographs, grid maps, evidence logs, and had decided to retrace the search area with fresh eyes. He walked the perimeter, moved through the undergrowth in a different pattern than the teams in 1985 had used. 300 feet from the first drum he stopped. Another drum. Same industrial design, same approximate age, partially obscured by leaves and undergrowth, not buried. Just sitting there in the woods in an area that had been documented and searched and walked through by trained investigators and evidence teams and reporters for 15 years. Inside were 2 more girls, one estimated between 3 and 7, one estimated between 1 and 4. All 4 had been killed the same way. All 4 had no identification. The case became a quadruple homicide. The New Hampshire State Police and Attorney General's office worked it intensively after the second drum surfaced. They entered profiles into CODIS when the FBI's National DNA Database launched in the late 1990s. They cross-referenced missing persons reports across the entire country. They sent the composite sketches to law enforcement in all 50 states. They created a dedicated case website and updated it regularly. CODIS came back empty every time they ran it. The profiles from the degraded remains produced limited matches. Whatever could be extracted did not connect to anyone in the system. Any family member who might have provided a comparison sample would have needed to be in a database somewhere. None of them were. By 2015, 30 years after the first drum was found, the case had 4 bodies, no names, and no leads that had survived scrutiny. It was not for lack of trying. It was for lack of a mechanism that could bridge the gap between what the investigators had and what they needed. That mechanism was about to exist. The case broke from an entirely unexpected direction 5 states away. In 2002, a woman named Yoon Jun disappeared from her home in Richmond, California. Her husband, going by the name Larry Vanner, reported her missing to the Richmond Police Department. Officers followed up weeks later. During that interview, Larry Vanner confessed. He had killed his wife. Her body was buried under a layer of cat litter beneath the concrete floor of their basement on Belmont Drive. He was convicted of first-degree murder in 2003 and sentenced to 15 years to life. While processing his case, California law enforcement ran his fingerprints through national databases as routine procedure. The fingerprints matched a man named Bob Evans, who had rented an apartment on Merrimack Street in Manchester, New Hampshire in 1981 with a woman named Denise Bodon. They matched a man named Curtis Kimball, who had worked construction jobs in towns near Bear Brook State Park in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They matched a man named Gordon Jensen, who had moved through California and Arizona in the mid-1980s. 4 different names, same fingerprints. All stolen identities, borrowed from real people who had died or disappeared, repurposed by one man who had apparently decided that living under his own name was no longer something he was willing to do. Investigators began tracing the movements documented under each alias. Employment records placed Curtis Kimball in southern New Hampshire during the exact window when the Bear Brook victims were believed to have been killed. Utility accounts and rental records showed him moving between Allenstown, Hooksett, and Manchester throughout the late 1970s. By the time investigators mapped the aliases against the geography of the case, the conclusion was difficult to argue with. In January 2017, New Hampshire authorities named him publicly as the prime suspect in all 4 Bear Brook murders. They could not arrest him. He had died 6 years earlier. December 28, 2010, in a California state prison hospital at age 67, still listed under the name Larry Vanner, buried in a prison cemetery under that borrowed identity. His real name was not known. That question, who was he really, became the second mystery running alongside the first. 4 victims with no names, 1 killer with no name. 2 parallel mysteries in the same case. Genetic genealogist Barbara Ray Venter began working the killer's DNA in 2015. She uploaded his profile to GEDmatch and started building outward from distant matches, tracing family trees through birth certificates, marriage records, census documents, and obituaries across Colorado, California, and surrounding states. It took months of meticulous work. The tree led to Denver. A man born in 1943 who had served honorably in the Navy, returned home, married, had 4 children, and in 1975 burned one of those children with cigarettes. He was arrested for aggravated assault. His wife took the children and left. After that, he discarded his name entirely and never used it again. His real name was Terry Peter Rasmussen. He had been living under stolen names since 1975. Every relationship, every job, every residence, all conducted under an identity that belonged to someone else. He had been invisible in plain sight for his entire adult criminal life. With the killer identified, investigators could now approach the victim identification from a different angle. If they knew his real name, they might be able to find out who he had been with during the years the victims were killed. And if they could find the women he had been with, they might find the children those women had. That logic was what led investigators to a librarian working after hours in Stratham, New Hampshire. Rebecca Heath had been following the Bear Brook case for years by the time investigators identified Terry Rasmussen as the suspect. She worked at the Wigan Memorial Library in Stratham, a small town on the seacoast of New Hampshire. Her job was straightforward library work, cataloging, reference assistance, community programming. By most measures, it was the kind of position that ended when she locked the building and drove home. Heath kept going after she got there. She sat at her kitchen table after dinner and searched. Ancestry databases, genealogy message boards, forums where people posted questions about missing relatives and unanswered family mysteries. Cold case websites where photographs and composite sketches of unidentified persons were posted with the hope that someone who saw them would recognize something. She was not a forensic professional. She had no investigative credentials. She had a library card and a laptop and several hours each night that she chose to spend on a case she could not stop thinking about. She searched for relatives of women who had gone missing in the late 1970s. Women who would have been in their 20s during the period when the Bear Brook victims were estimated to have died. Women who had disappeared from areas where Rasmussen's aliases had placed him. Most nights produced nothing. In October 2018, Heath found a message on an ancestry forum. A woman in California had posted several months earlier looking for a family member. The woman's relative had been born in 1977. Female. The timeline matched. The age matched. The geographic overlap between where this woman was searching and where Rasmussen had been active matched. The relative's name was Sarah McWaters. Heath cross-referenced the name against the Bear Brook case documentation. The girl from the first drum, the one found with the adult woman in 1985, had been estimated between 6 and 10 years old when she died. A birth year of 1977 placed her at the right age for a death in the early 1980s. Heath contacted the California woman and asked her to share everything she knew about Sarah McWaters. At the same time, Barbara Ray Venter's forensic genealogy work on the suspect's DNA was pointing toward the same family from a completely different angle, working not from the victim's side but from the killer's known relationships. The 2 independent investigations, built by 2 people who had never spoken to each other using entirely different methodologies, were converging on the same family. In June 2019, New Hampshire Attorney General Gordon MacDonald announced 3 identifications publicly for the first time, 34 years after the first drum was found. The adult woman was Marlies Elizabeth Honeychurch, born 1954 in Fairfield, Connecticut. Vanished around Thanksgiving 1978 from La Puente, California, with a man her family did not know. She was 24. She had left with no forwarding address and had been assumed to have chosen to disappear. The older girl found with her was Marie Elizabeth Vaughn, Marlies' daughter. Born December 1971, she was 6 or 7 when she died. The second girl found in that first drum was Sarah Lynn McWaters, Marlies' second daughter. Born December 1977, she was between 1 and 3 years old when she died. 3 names, 4 victims. The middle child, the girl in the second drum found in 2000, still had no name. In January 2024, the New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit entered a partnership with the DNA Doe Project, a volunteer organization founded in 2017 that uses genetic genealogy to identify unidentified human remains. Their volunteers are professional genealogists and highly experienced researchers who contribute their time without compensation because they believe no person should remain nameless. For the Bear Brook middle child, they assembled a team of more than 40 genealogists. The DNA work was the first obstacle. Remains sealed in a steel drum in a New Hampshire forest for more than 40 years degrade from bacteria, fluctuating moisture, and ongoing chemical breakdown. The University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, one of the leading forensic DNA labs in the country, ran multiple extraction attempts using standard protocols. Standard protocols failed. Modified techniques produced a partial profile, degraded but workable. The lab uploaded the profile to ancestry databases where people share the results of commercial DNA tests to research their family histories. Distant matches appeared, third cousins, fourth cousins, people related to the remains at a degree of kinship that required building outward through multiple generations to find the connection point. The genealogists began constructing a family tree, verifying every branch, birth certificates pulled from county courthouses in Texas, California, Oklahoma, and Colorado, marriage records, death certificates, obituaries, census filings, school enrollment records, military service documentation. Every branch of every family that appeared in those distant matches had to be traced and either confirmed or eliminated. Over more than a year of work, the tree grew to approximately 25,000 individuals spanning multiple generations in at least 5 states. The tree pointed toward East Texas. A specific family connected through multiple ancestral lines to the partial DNA profile recovered from the middle child. The connection traced to a woman named Pepper Reed, born 1952 in Orange County, Texas, a small city on the Louisiana border in the southeastern corner of the state. Investigators researching Rasmussen's known history found that a Pepper Reed had been in a relationship with him in California in the mid-1970s. Her family in Texas had last confirmed contact with her around Christmas 1975. She had visited them in Orange while pregnant. They knew she was expecting. They did not know who the father was or where she was going afterward. They had not heard from her since. A birth certificate from Orange County, California confirmed a girl was born there in 1976. Father listed Terry Peter Rasmussen. Child listed Rhea Rasmussen. DNA from the middle child, the girl found in the second drum in 2000, the one estimated between 3 and 7 years old, was compared against a reference sample from one of Rasmussen's confirmed biological relatives. The match confirmed she was Rasmussen's biological daughter. A Y-DNA comparison using material recovered from Rasmussen's 2010 prison autopsy confirmed his paternity. The middle child was Rhea Rasmussen, between 2 and 4 years old, killed by her own father. Sealed in a drum alongside Marlies Honeychurch and Marie Vaughn, 2 people she had likely never met, and left in the woods of Allenstown, New Hampshire. She had been in that drum for approximately 40 years before anyone knew her name. On September 5, 2025, Senior Assistant Attorney General Benjamin Agati announced the identification at a press conference in Concord. Detective Sergeant Christopher Elphick, who had worked the Bear Brook case for years, said the investigation team had never forgotten Rhea and had never stopped looking. Rebecca Heath, the librarian from Stratham who had spent years searching ancestry forums after her shifts, was acknowledged for her contribution to the identification of Sarah McWaters and to the broader investigation that eventually led to Rhea's name. She had never been paid for that work. She had never been asked to do it. She had done it because she believed that 4 people in 2 steel drums in the woods deserved to have their names spoken out loud. 3 of those names she helped find. The 4th took $25,000 more. On September 5, 2025, Rhea Rasmussen finally got her name back after 40 years. But identifying Rhea created a new question nobody at that press conference could answer. And that question changes everything you just watched. Because cases like this reveal patterns most people never notice until it's too late. After covering hundreds of disappearances and cold cases, I started noticing the same warning signs appearing again and again. The same mistakes, the same moments of vulnerability, the same predator behaviors hiding in plain sight. So I put together a short guide called How to Avoid Becoming a True Crime Story. It breaks down the real behaviors predators look for, common mistakes victims made before disappearing, and practical safety habits that help protect you and your family. If you want to read it, the link is below. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe, share this video with someone you care about, and help keep these stories alive. Because one conversation, one warning sign, or one decision can change everything. It might matter more than you think. Where is Pepper Reed? That is the question. Pepper was last confirmed alive by her family in Texas around Christmas 1975. She was pregnant. She had been in a relationship with Rasmussen. Her family assumed she had chosen to walk away, to build a life somewhere else without them. That assumption was easier than the alternative, and the alternative did not occur to them until investigators made contact decades later. New Hampshire State Police and the FBI have searched property records and parcels of land associated with every alias Rasmussen used across multiple states. They have reviewed records from every address he can be placed at between 1975 and 1981. They have found nothing. Pepper Reed's body has never been recovered. She has been missing for roughly 50 years. Denise Bowden, the woman who vanished from Manchester with Rasmussen in 1981, has also never been found. Her daughter Dawn, who was approximately 6 months old when Bowden disappeared, was raised for the first 5 years of her life by Rasmussen under a false name. When he abandoned her at an RV park in Scotts Valley, California in 1986, she was 6 years old and did not know her real name, her mother's real name, or what had happened to either of them. She was adopted through the Santa Cruz County courts and grew up in the Bay Area. By the time anyone explained the truth to her, Rasmussen had been dead for years. The confirmed victims are 5 in number: Marlies Honeychurch, Marie Vaughn, Sarah McWaters, Rhea Rasmussen, Yoon Soon Jun, Pepper Reed, and Denise Bowden are both presumed dead. Law enforcement believes the actual count is higher. The 15 states Rasmussen moved through across 3 decades under 4 stolen names hold answers that he chose not to give and that he took with him when he died in that prison hospital in 2010 at 67. He never confessed to the Bear Brook killings. He never named the location of a single missing woman. He never gave anyone's family the thing they had been waiting for. He died under a name that was not his in a prison cemetery in California. He is buried there now under that borrowed identity. Terry Peter Rasmussen, the name he was born with, the name he discarded in 1975 after burning his son with cigarettes, is the name on no grave marker anywhere. The 4 children in the 2 drums had no names for 40 years because of him. 2 women are still missing because of him. Rhea came home on September 5, 2025. Her mother has not. At the press conference, a victim witness specialist read a statement from Pepper Reed's family. The family in East Texas, who had spent 50 years assuming Pepper had chosen to disappear. Pepper is deeply loved and missed every single day. Though we did not have an opportunity to meet Rhea, she is cherished just as much in our hearts. 2 people in that statement, 2 women. 2 names Rasmussen never spoke. 1 family in Texas who waited 50 years to understand what had happened to a daughter who came home for Christmas in 1975 pregnant and smiling, and then never came back. Rhea came home. Pepper is still missing. Rebecca Heath sat at her kitchen table after her library shifts and searched ancestry forums for years without anyone asking her to and without anyone paying her. She found one message in October 2018 from a woman in California looking for Sarah McWaters. That message gave Sarah her name back. The DNA Doe Project assembled 40 volunteers who spent more than a year building a family tree of 25,000 people across 5 states to find one name for one child who had been in a steel drum for 4 decades. 25,000 names for one child. Rasmussen gave nobody anything. He moved through 6 states under 4 stolen identities for 3 decades. He put children in drums and drove away. He died at 67 in a California prison hospital and took with him the locations of at least 2 women whose families have now been waiting for 50 years. The second drum sat 300 feet from the first for 15 years while trained investigators walked past it. Rhea sat in that drum the entire time. She was between 2 and 4 years old when her father put her there. She had a name before he took it from her. It took 4 decades and 25,000 strangers working without pay in their spare time to give it back.